All right, let's head out to the cloud in the sky where we've got Mr. Joe Sinnott on the line with us. He's the host of the Energy Detox podcast. He's also a executive coach for Whitting Partners. And how's business, by the way? How's that going? I backed you into a corner today. Sorry about that.
Business is good. Sometimes it's good to be backed into a corner, Jason. It minimizes the amount of decisions you have to make. So,
This
sometimes
is
that's
the
not a bad
official
thing.
back into the corner edition of the podcast where we've backed Mr. Joe Sinnott into the corner, much like Mike Tomlin has been backed into a corner. Huh? Look at that segue. Look at that transition. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on because, I mean, let's be honest, this is not a sports talk program, but sports is such an easy metaphor for so many different areas of life that it's done in so many different areas. I mean, it's like, oh, we're on par. Well, that's a golf term. I mean, that's that people don't even realize how often it comes into our normal life. But here you're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so obviously you follow the Pittsburgh Steelers by osmosis. Whether it's your favorite team or not is irrelevant. It's much like me being in Minnesota. I have to follow the Vikings, whether it's my favorite team or not. If I want to show my face around a local cafe, I got to talk the talk. And so Pittsburgh, I imagine, is very similar with the steel mills there and blue collar Pittsburgh, even though it's one of the cleaner towns I've ever been to, actually, one of the more beautiful towns. Amazing first impression from what I was told as a kid how dirty the town was. At any rate, interesting. Two storylines coming out of Pittsburgh. One is whether Aaron Rodgers should hang it up. So if you're a retiring veteran, but you still feel like maybe you can go, and that's the first one. And then the second one is when outside sources manufacture a storyline for your life, how do you get your narrative back? How do you ignore your narrative? How do you go into work when your coworkers are listening to the narrative that your owners didn't even come up with? Because on the let's start with the Mike Tomlin one because that one's incredible because every source that is of any salt says the ownership has no interest of making a coaching change. Yet every single social media pundit out there is trying to get this guy fired. That 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 happens in business, in oil and gas especially. That's a ruthless business, man. Let's talk about that. That's a what a weird scenario. And by the way, in the media, extremely common. I mean, in the media, I've said this for years. You've never seen people work so hard not to work. It's unbelievable. These people will work their butts off not to work. As long as it makes you look bad, they'll work their butts off. It's like so. Anyway, what do you think of that? If someone else is controlling your narrative outside of your company, but your company's starting to listen, Joel, what's happening? How you doing, by the way, and what's going on?
Well, I'm doing fine, Jason. And yeah, you're kicking things off, no pun intended, with pretty loaded either question or at least situation there, which again, I'll start with where my mind goes in these types of things, which is, what do you want? What does success look like? What do your stakeholders, what do your fans want? What do your investors want if you're talking from a business standpoint? And, at least if you start there, you can, buy yourself a little bit of time before going down the path of talking about the individual performers and the personalities and the noise and all of that. Again, that doesn't buy you infinite amount of time, Jason, but theoretically, that is the most important thing, right? And then again, listen to Mike Tomlin after the game. I mean, he's not, obviously he's not ignorant to the fact that the results, they are what they are, right? And they didn't perform. And Mike Tomlin himself said multiple times about how there's so much talking out there and it doesn't do anybody any good. And again, no matter what people's opinions are on Mike Tomlin as a coach, you got to start with results. And he's not shying away from the fact that results are incredibly disappointing, both in terms of their exit from the playoffs this season and their exit the prior 8-9 years since they last won a playoff game. So I'll pause there, Jason, but making sure that the conversation is focused on as much fact as possible and not, as you say, the rumors, the chatter, the hearsay, all of that is really the only way the only way that you're going to arrive at any sort of, reasonable, let alone, advantageous or positive solution.
How much of this is fueled by social media? And I'm trying to be respectful and tiptoe a little bit around this because social media is a very important part of the business ecosystem. There's there are legitimate, like when LinkedIn had a better day than it is now. There was a time when LinkedIn probably met its requirements of what it was trying to be, and then it turned into kind of a Facebook light, an Instagram light, to where a lot of influencers that necessarily couldn't get traction in the world of Facebook or Instagram went on to LinkedIn because honestly, because their companies were funding it. That they worked in sales or HR or marketing or wherever. But at the end of the day, they were using their business's platform and money to build their personal brand. So when we started to bleed that in a little bit into the professional social media, from a media standpoint, there's a reason I backed out to the onslaught that I used to do, because it's expensive, first of all, to try to compete in that pay to play narrative that social media openly says they're about. I mean, let's be honest, and then you fold in the oil and gas industry, and there's evidence of shadow banning. So all of a sudden now, if you work in the industry, your voice is kind of being suppressed by the algorithm. So there's a lot of outside circumstances that can really influence your voice, Mike Tomlin's voice, or Aaron Rodgers' voice. And Joe, I'm not even sure if there's a right answer on this, because at the end of the day, perception is reality. And trying to, I used to call it the wildfire back before social media. If you worked in the media, if you worked in the radio industry or newspaper or television, and all of a sudden a local rumor started about you, I've actually sat at tables before and heard things about me from people I've never met sitting across the table, to where I've actually introduced myself. Oh, how you doing? By the way, the person you're talking about, that's me. And I call that the wildfire. You can't stop it. It just goes. And on social media, it's like putting gasoline on there. So from an executive coach's standpoint, I don't understand how you would coach that. It's a lose-lose, man.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you threw a lot of stuff out there.
Of course I do. That's how I do that. We're throwing spaghetti at the wall.
See where the synapses lead here. So one, in terms of the role of social media, I mean, real quick, clearly, I'm not a media specialist, guru. I'll claim ignorance on all that, other than the fact that it seems to me, at least from the football standpoint, that your traditional media still drives so much, and drive, again, no pun intended, because driving around, people are still listening to traditional sports talk. I had it on this morning, driving in with the kids, again, for no other reason than, that's sort of where the pulse is, sort of the primary narratives, if you will, exist, for better or for worse. So, print media, radio still drives, I feel, so much of the conversation around sports, at least here in Pittsburgh. Now, in terms of the realities, though, of how much that is fueled, how much the wildfires can be fueled by social media, here's what I'll say, Jason. And again, you asked from an executive coaching standpoint. It comes down to, again, not a unique concept, it comes down to who is telling your story. And I think that was on display after the Steelers' loss, in the comments, particularly of Aaron Rodgers, and also even some of the, some of the sports talk folks, where they're saying, look, there's so many narratives out there about, say, Mike Tomlin, and there were so many narratives out there about Aaron Rodgers as a teammate and as an individual. And you know whose voice actually matters? It's the people in the locker room. And again, I don't want to sound like some, cliche. This is not a unique concept, but to hear these sports talk guys who are, again, they can be as rabid and as opinionated as possible, but even they will stop in their tracks when they say, hey, listen to what these, veterans on the team are saying about Mike Tomlin as a coach, are saying about Aaron Rodgers as a teammate. By every account, at least again in the short amount of time that Aaron Rodgers has been in Pittsburgh, he comes across as the ideal teammate. But would you have known that if, again, you just kind of listened to that extra chatter, the social media, and hey, look, he's a head case here, he's got some crazy thoughts here, whatever. None of those opinions matter. And then when you realize how few opinions really matter, and you realize how important those few opinions are, well, that's going to help you whether you are an executive, whether you're in career transition, and recognize that you need other people telling your story. And again, not a unique concept, Jason, but it can be very difficult to arrive at that conclusion to say, all right, fine, who are the 2 or 3 people that can tell your story, or that, can give you some sort of nugget about yourself that, even if it's you sort of retelling, you're framing it in other people's words. That's, again, a lot of higher level stuff there, Jason, but coaching people through these tricky situations when there's narratives out there, when they're navigating the muck of the corporate world, it's slowing them down and recognizing, all right, who are the people who have those facts, who can speak clearly, whether you want to hear it or not? Who are the voices that you can trust and that other people will trust? Taking the time to find those people, Jason, is invaluable. And it's, again, in many cases, I think the only path through, the noise and the chaos and the disruption and the chatter, if you will.
So here's a question that if anybody's out there listening and recorded monetary value for the IRS, they'd have to record this because this question's well worth over $600. Now, you like that lead in? That's pretty good. Just came up with that right on the fly here, because where I'm going with it is that it's difficult to control your narrative when other people are doing it. And what I mean by that, Joe, is there's an art to it. And this is where the monetary value comes in, because reacting to someone else's narrative, you've already lost. You've already lost, but you still have to acknowledge it in some way. How do you do that? That's difficult, because in Tomlin, he's really good about it. He just ignores it unless you ask him point blank, and then he gives you one of his just money shot of an answers, and never say never, but never. Just one of my favorite quotes of all time. Speaking of which, by the way, did you catch the interview with Bill Cowher about a week ago, where he threw Chuck Noll under the bus?
I did not, no.
Just fantastic, because apparently Chuck Noll was the last Steelers coach to lose on a Monday night. And Bill Cowher had to point that out, that, oh no, it was before me. Chuck Noll was the last one. Just totally threw Chuck Noll, the living legend, under the bus in just fantastic fashion. So, and I don't believe Chuck is still with us to defend himself. So, God bless. But controlling your narrative is difficult. That's that art that we're talking about here. So, how do you not react and acknowledge, I guess, would be the question.
Well, so what is sort of whether you vocalize those words or whether you arrive there in some other way. It's, if something comes up that is relevant, you address it, right? I mean, let's not ignore the elephants in the room. But to your point, Jason, if, reporters or whomever are bringing up things that are really inconsequential to the big picture or to the goal of winning a Super Bowl or whatever, then the best thing you could do is tactfully in some cases and not so tactfully in others, say, well, so what? Before I answer that question, basically, how does the answer to my question really lead to anything of value, right? Does it really matter what I have to say on this? Or are you just looking for a soundbite or to, again, add fuel to the fire? Now, again, those aren't the words you're necessarily going to use, Jason, but that's the mindset, which is, all right, does this line of questioning offer any insights into what it's going to take to win a Super Bowl next year, for example? That's that filter, Jason. And then again, how you approach it, whether you decide to engage, whether you redirect, whether you just kind of go after the person for asking a question that is, again, really of minimal value. That's discretionary, but that's really what I encourage people to do and what I coach people on, which is looking for those so what moments and recognizing that, sometimes if you're asking yourself the so what, it is an opportunity to say, look, that really is a good question. Whether you have an answer to it, it's a different story. But that's sort of the thought process, Jason. That's the approach that I lead people through in all situations.
The one thing I noticed that Tomlin does is he doesn't assume that anybody has listened to whatever that outside noise is. And so when it's brought up, he just kind of acts not surprised, but he's like, "Oh, okay." And I do notice that, and I noticed a couple people have asked him like, "Well, come on, man, what are you talking about? You didn't know this? Nobody's texting you?" And he made a comment about how when he starts getting texts from family members about things, there's obviously some outsized noise coming inside. And to juxtaposition that, Aaron Rodgers will say what is the assumption. And I do notice that as a difference how the two of them handle their press conferences, where I think Aaron Rodgers even flat out in one of the press conferences brought up, I know you guys are talking about one of us getting fired and, probably the quarterback going away. So he puts it out there. Whereas, Tomlin makes you put it out there, but he also has a way to like, I'm not going to show you that I even acknowledge it. And so that's a skill, by the way, being able to poker face the outside noise. But talk about the Aaron Rodgers strategy where, okay, I'm going to control the narrative. I know all you are thinking it. I'm going to put it out there. I'm not going to let you try to control. Tomlin is so skilled, he lets them try to control it, and then he just coaches the heck out of them. Aaron Rodgers tries to quarterback it and take control, I guess would be probably the analogy. So talk to me about controlling the narrative in a way where you just put it out there.
Well, I mean, I actually like how you outlined two very independent approaches. So starting with the Mike Tomlin approach, and again, he did this after they bowed out of the playoffs in the press conference. And, people were asking kind of the same question in different ways. And he said, I've already answered that. So clearly Mike Tomlin's approach is I'm not going to introduce extra words when I don't have to, especially if I've already answered the question. That's his approach. Whereas again, Aaron Rodgers or others, they might be inclined, as you said, to, I'm going to throw extra words out there, but I'm going to do it on my terms. I'm going to do it proactively. I'm going to address the elephants in the room instead of making you dance around the elephants in the room and call them out yourselves. Either way, as long as the elephants in the room are, addressed in some way, well, that's healthy. And again, it's stylistic. They can both work. They can both upset other people, right? Especially, when clearly either approach is a matter of taking control, just again, from completely opposite angle. And again, I never really thought about that, but thinking about the specific words that those individuals use, I mean, they're telling you right there. As I said earlier, Jason, Mike Tomlin, I mean, he said multiple times, this is not the time for words. There's already so many words out there. Black and white. We lost. It's disappointing. We got to deal with it. But, what are these words going to do? Whereas, again, you might say, words are powerful. I'm gonna throw some of mine out there and make sure that we're speaking on my terms. So again, I mean, I'm kind of thinking through this in real time too, Jason, but I think it speaks to different communication styles, different approaches, but really at the end of the day, both of them can get to the point where they are controlling the conversation.
Couple examples about where social media can control your business decisions in not a very good way, because social media is not a very good Gallup poll, if you will, for the pulse of anything. It's an amplification of a minority. And when I was working in the media, this was back in 20, let's call it 2011, maybe 2012, 2011, 2010. It was when the flu vaccines, not the COVID, but the flu vaccines were being protested. And there was a talk of a local protest in Fargo, North Dakota. And the radio station I worked at, we were, the news talk station, one of the number one station for 40 years straight, something like that. Had a very good relationship with law enforcement and fire officials, and we were next to them on first responder calls all the time, and giving them access when they needed it. Because the radio was the lifeblood back then. I mean, we for crying out loud, thousands of pets we reunited with their owners because we'd do pet patrol. Somebody would lose a pet, we'd put them, we'd interrupt anything. We'd interrupt the president of the United States to make sure somebody got their pet, you know. But that was local radio. They loved it. They loved us for it, right? And God, we got a bird one time. We reunited a macaw bird one time. Yes, still to this day. I hope they do ads for that. At any rate, the social media protest was bigger than the real one. But the Fargo police had 4 snipers on top of the hospital in case of chaos. And there was like 2 people that showed up. There was much more social media chatter than there was anything in reality. And in the world of professional wrestling, I'll give you another example. This was an issue where the WWE and there was another outfit called AEW, All Elite Wrestling. They went different ways. WWE just stopped listening to anybody on social media, like pretty much even turned comments off, I think, in some areas. And AEW started listening to the online fantasy bookers, basically, and the product suffered because of it. The ratings went down. They had to shift gears, but that was the thing, is that they made a conscious effort to try to appease that very loud minority online, whereas the WWE went, no, no way, man. And so they both went their own directions. And because of the polarization of their business models, you were able to see the end result like under a microscope. And I having the history of fighting floods and dealing with protests, saw how it would work as well from a news standpoint. So in business, some people do let social media dictate their business decisions. The Green Bay Packers and the Baltimore Ravens are 2 examples in the NFL where they allowed the Ravens, social media, and a bunch of pundit sports writers to create a narrative that one of the most winning coaches and everything couldn't get over the hump. And same thing with the Green Bay Packers. Couldn't get over the hump. Tomlin can't get over the hump. Okay, well, there's only one a year that gets to do that. And for like 10 years, it was Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. That's it. So it's not like they're handing out these trophies like they're candy and participation. Everyone thinks it's like a participation award. Everyone should get one. So anyway, it's a long story longer to try to ask the question of, I understand when you need a jolt for your business to get over that hump. Well, that's why everybody connects with it. We've all been at the hump, and we want to get over the hump. But sometimes firing your most productive person is not the way to go. It's maybe get him some better support. Maybe find out what the deal. Anyway, talk to me a little bit about that, because social media is starting to impact NFL coaching careers now. It started in professional wrestling like it always does. Porn and wrestling is where it starts, Joe, and then it works its way in, is what I'm told. So anyway.
Well, again, Jason, you throw plenty out there, but I guess
that was a media joke, by the way, for those people out there, because whenever a new technology comes into play, it's the adult entertainment world that adapts it quickly, profits off it, much like the Defense Department and the rest of the world. But on the media side, we learn from the porn industry. That's the truest statement ever. So I'm ashamed to admit it, but it is true. But anyways, go on.
Well, so what I was going to say is, there's only so much you can do and say that's actually going to get through to your audience. So in other words, with the Ravens making their decision, I don't know what their formal press release was, announcing the dismissal or the separation of ways with Harbaugh. But let's start with what should ideally be said in those situations. And again, clearly we're not just talking sports, we're talking, corporate decisions and organizational decisions and hirings and firings and promotions and all of the above. Management needs to be abundantly clear that they're making decisions that they believe will lead to a certain result. They might be wrong, but That's why they're making those decisions. And if they can do it, again, in a way that comes across as honest, like that should be the measuring stick. If the Steelers firmly believe that retaining Mike Tomlin and whatever other moves they make in the offseason are the best possible moves they can make with whatever, options they have to win a Super Bowl next year or to win a Super Bowl in 3 years, or again, whatever sort of the metric is, whatever the goal is, if they can articulate that, again, whether people believe it or not, I mean, they have to start there. Does that make sense, Jason? Because what happens so much is, these things go unsaid, right? So you leave it to everybody. If you don't make any attempt to clarify your thinking and sort of the odds that you're weighing in your mind, the decision making. Not that everybody, in your audience, whether they're employees or fans, deserve to have insights into your thinking. But if you don't make some attempt to share, hey, here's my thought process, here's the calculated risks I'm taking, here's the conclusion I've reached. I think, there's a 70% chance that the decision I'm going to make is going to lead, to positive results. And there's a 30% chance it doesn't. I might be wrong. Maybe it's 50-50. Maybe it's, 20-80 the other direction. But anything you can do to share some measure of how you arrived at that conclusion can only help. Now, it might not help at all, but at least you're giving yourself a shot. And Jason, that's what I see so much. Again, sports world, when you're talking about, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of eyeballs and ears who are going to make their own opinion.
But in this example, though, I did want to bring it back to the oil and gas specifically. Please. Because in this example, Joe, the fans are a lot like shareholders. And so there can be a connection here where maybe the shareholders are not happy with the CEO or the whoever because they're not integrating new technology fast enough or whatever the case might be. And it really forces something to a head. And what I find fascinating in both the Baltimore Ravens and the Green Bay Packers is they're going different directions too. Meaning that in the Ravens, I think it was mutual. They both said, okay, we've got better pastures on both sides. And you know what? They're probably both right. It happened with Andy Reid in Philadelphia. It does happen where organizations and leadership can say, you know what? We're just not a good fit anymore. And that can happen. Mm-hmm. And so the shareholders or the fans are picking up on this. Things are not jiving. There's something that's just amiss, so we're going to make you guys deal with it. Now, on Green Bay, it came to a head, and they tried to go after that coach afterwards, and all that coach said was, what's his name, LaFleur? All he said was, hey, guy, listen, this is not the time. This is not, over and over again, it's not the time. This is not the time. And then next day, they're going to, extend him another 5 years or something like that. They're going to basically do the opposite of what Baltimore did. And so when your shareholders or social media or your neighbors down the street or whatever, when there's clamoring and chattering because alignment is off within your organization, it is a good idea just to, hey, let's have the what did they call in the old days? The come to Jesus meeting, I guess, is what we used to call it in our Catholic days. And where you just, hey, you gotta have an honest conversation with yourself and everybody else. And in the Baltimore Ravens case, or in the Philadelphia Eagles, Andy Reid's case, greener pastures prevailed. But there is a flip side to this, which is what the Packers didn't want to find out. Do we really want to try to find someone to come to Green Bay and coach here where Aaron Rodgers, he's still trying to sell his house. He can't sell it. He's been gone for 4 years, and he still can't sell his house. And, that's a reality, and it's cold, and it's not like, it's just there's differences here. So talk to me a little bit about that, because sometimes it is good to have that, I guess, that uprising to call out the hey, you guys are out of touch. You're not connecting with us anymore. Things are aren't aligned correctly, and so we can go through a lot of examples. Occidental Petroleum is now Oxy, a carbon management company, so they aligned themselves right into from energy to carbon, whereas a lot of companies are going from oil and gas to energy. And they're finding out now, and I've made this comment before, and I still think I'm going to see it in my lifetime. Exxon, Chipotle, Verizon will be a company, because I mean you're going to see companies that diversified trying to figure out how to solve their bottom line issues. That you're going to see this is the most bizarre mergers happen. All right, your turn to talk, because I've been going too long.
No, actually, I think what you just shared, Jason, can be summarized in my mind as the importance of conscious leadership. Because whether we're talking sports fans or employees or shareholders, the one thing they all want, they want a lot of things, but the one thing that universally they want is to know that the people in charge are conscious. They're aware. They're not asleep at the wheel. They're not making knee-jerk reactions, and they're also not, blindly doing what they've always done. Like, that's it. I mean, I think that's a human piece, but again, regardless of the type of stakeholder, that's what they want. They want to know that they have a conscious leader. Yes, they want leaders who make correct decisions 100% of the time. That's not reality. But what they will settle for is, well, at least they're thinking through it. Again, at least they're bringing in the right resources, and they're thinking, things in the right manner, and they're not asleep at the wheel. And I say this, somewhat self-serving, Jason. I preach conscious leadership all the time because my company's named after the idea of being a conscious leader. Witting Partners. The whole idea is there's so many leaders out there who are unwittingly just going through the motions, unwittingly making short-sighted decisions, unwittingly just, listening to social media and the narratives and going forth and not thinking critically. And that's not what people want. They want conscious leaders, witting leaders, if you will. And so, Jason, everything that you just described, I think, can be boiled down to just that. One, are you a conscious leader? And two, what can you do to convey that in a succinct, tactful, articulate, clear manner so that the people around you, even if they disagree with your decision, at least know that you are doing it consciously?
What's happening out in the Marcellus these days? Been seeing a few things about Vicky Energy, something about Duke, and some AI, some different things happening. I know there's usually a big shale coalition event that happens as well. And so anyway, any happenings out in the Marcellus? I know the first quarter is usually pretty quiet in most areas.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for one, of course, you can't escape AI. I think we're still maybe it's a little slower in January, but we'll be right back at it here. I think in a couple of weeks here with the AI conferences and data center conferences, and of course, all things AI and data centers lead to natural gas. So that continues to dominate the conversations, Jason. I think from a price standpoint, natural gas prices were up there for a while. They took a tumble there just as the new year kicked off, but it's, it's a commodity business, right? Beyond that, Jason, yeah, you alluded to some of the bigger events. The Shale Insight Conference, that's not till September. But again, this industry doesn't take a day off. But I'd say right now, Jason, it's all about the data centers and what that's going to mean. And, what does it mean for obviously the demand of electricity and in turn natural gas to generate that electricity? What does it mean for consumers? What does it mean for jobs? And just like sports and just like the coaching carousel and just like everything else, there's a whole lot of talking, there's a whole lot of words, there's a whole lot of so-called experts, there's a whole lot of stuff on social media and traditional media. But how many people really know what's going to happen? That's my take here as we sit here early in the new year.
A Brett Favre Minnesota Vikings jersey just walked in here. I mean, there's a guy living in the past there, baby. Oh, yeah, look at that. I was going to say, too, the thing that I've noticed, by the way, we're in our going in our 15th year now with the Crude Life from our first interview. Our company was started in 2012. But the first interview, the one that got us hooked, was 2011 with the guy rags to riches story across statewide radio talking about is making a couple $100,000 and just setting the world on fire out there. And a guy who was slinging drinks at a bar in Fargo talking about, oh yeah, no, now I'm working for this company and making this, and the whole crew camp and all that was new to the state, and so it just and most people actually, and so it just kind of exploded from there and perked my interest. But anyway, I was just kind of noticing that living in the past there a little bit. But what I've noticed over the last 15 years was that right around the May timeline, and I noticed it specifically because of the Williston Basin Petroleum Conference, which alternates between Canada and the U.S. That was almost like the starter pistol for a lot of these individuals. They would go to NAPE in February, and but beyond that, it wasn't until like May is when really the trade show season kind of took off. It was almost a lot more white collar for the first, February, March, April, that type of stuff. And then they were gearing up for more of the barbecues and the summer activity, the kids getting out of school and a number of different things. Is that how it is out in your neck of the woods too? Is that right around that May is when kind of the starter pistol for a lot of the industry events kick off, or do you have some in the earlier time frames?
Most of the earlier ones, again, that are on my radar are smaller. So, chapter meetings of, say, AADE and
Yeah.
SPE, there's, heck, each of them have an event this week, which, again, well attended, certainly for the basin, for the Appalachian Basin, one of the biggest events of the year is put on by American Association of Drilling Engineers, Appalachian chapter here in Pittsburgh, and that's an operators forum. So every February they bring in, folks from, the operators here in the Appalachian Basin, in the Marcellus, to give some insight onto, what their activity looks like in the coming year. And, that's super well attended. Again, getting 100, a couple hundred people in the room there. This isn't some big national event, but it's significant. People put it on their calendars. They certainly push the limits of whatever venue they're in. And, it's one of those, what else do you need? It's a one-day event. That a lot of the people that you might be looking to engage with are going to be there, and you're going to get some valuable insights. And you're doing it though without all of the bells and whistles and everything else that comes with some of these bigger events. So, whether that's a tangent or
No,
it's
it's
unconscious plug for the AADE Operators Forum up here. Those are the things that are on people's calendars that, again, outside of this region, it's not going to make the national list of oil and gas events.
But it validates what I was thinking, because the when you look at the oil and gas industry, it's very central planning at the core. Look at Houston. Houston is, it circles with it's like DC. Engineers dream, right? You're trying to central plan as much as possible, and so when you take a look at these conferences, they're set up a lot of ways the same way, where your annual meetings are between the October and December, and then the January through March is these meetings that you're talking about, where a couple hundred of the people show up and they get briefed on basically what the annual meetings were about, and then everybody gets on the same page there, and then all of a sudden, when that summertime rolls around, when the kids get out of school and you start doing the more of the tens of thousands attendance events and that sort of thing, the industry's on the same page. That's the one thing about this industry that I've always been very impressed with, is their ability to do central planning in one of the most chaotic industries, and then you fold in what the internet brings, and it's all disruptors and all these different things, and it becomes the Blade Runner versus central planning. It's very different. Anyway, so sorry, that's just a Libra mind at work here, looking at formulas and blueprints and about everything in life. So, well, that's all I got today, man. You doing any podcasting? Is a new season coming out soon?
Yeah, transitioning from season 6 to 7. Intentional reference there to is that social? I don't know if that's social media trend. Is that going to die yet? What's the estimated death of the 6-7 trend, Jason? I don't know.
I just heard
you're
today
hip to the media here, so
I just heard today actually that over 50%, but less than 60. So over 50% of podcasters quit after the first one. After
Wow.
the first one, they realize, yeah, this ain't for me. Nope, nope, nope. And they at some point the work versus input versus output kicks in, and there's such a saturation out there. I mean, and in all honesty, I mean, we wouldn't be doing this still if I didn't have that core thousands and thousands of people that subscribe, because I've been doing this for 15 years. And we have the radio station, so we're constantly like we picked up 10 new subscribers last week that are not even from this country. And this is, are they going to buy anything? I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not selling anything right now, but a Paramount subscription. I mean, you might sell some things from this interview. Hopefully, that'd be nice. But you're not really selling T-shirts or anything like that. No, you're like in the trust business. So I mean, yours is a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it's a totally different sell, if you will. And so that's what makes these industries so different. And for like me, when I look at podcasting, I've never looked at it in the same way that everyone else looks at it. I mean, I've literally done 10,000 podcasts probably, because every person I interview for a story is a podcast. Now, I'm not doing stories like I used to, but back when I was doing magazines, I would interview 6 people for one story. I mean, because you need some difference of opinion. And so all of a sudden, you got 6 podcasts that you've done in a week, and you don't even have time to put them online because you're too busy writing the story. And so, long story longer, after 50% quit. So you're in a very small minority if you're on season 7 of it. And so congratulations on that, because you understand what your podcast is. You understand what it does, who your audience is, and what the value is that you get out of it. And that right there is very difficult for most podcasters to understand, because everybody thinks every podcaster should be Joe Rogan, and they're not. So
Yeah,
yeah,
well put, Jason. And again, I think all roads lead back to conscious leadership, right? Are you aware of why you're doing it, or are you just going through the motions? Are you aware of why you started in the first place? Because again, if not, then yeah, one and done is probably not not to be unexpected. So
well, even in this little town of Fergus Falls here, there was a younger guy in his 30s. He was doing the Fergus Falls Spotlight, right? It was just a local, basically a podcast magazine. You just go interview, you just sit down and talk to business owners for a half hour to an hour, and probably get 100 views, 100 whatever. I mean, but the town's only 15,000 people. And so he was, I met him in Fargo just serendipitously out front of a diner, and he joined me and my colleague for lunch or breakfast or whatever it was. And while we were having our story, he asked him, he's like, "What do you do?" And he says, "Oh, I work for the radio station down in Fergus Falls." And except he led with the podcast. That's what he led with. And then he got into this like defensive mode, like, because he assumed that everybody is right to Joe Rogan. Oh, well, you must have $1 million sponsor. Okay, are you on Spotify? You can almost hear the 20-year-old questions coming, the 20-year-old person questions coming versus the 75-year-old media veteran that I was having lunch with. And I just kind of interrupted, and I just said, I go, honestly, I go, for what the podcast is and for what it does, it's probably the most successful podcast in Fergus Falls. And he stopped and he looked at me and he goes, "Thank you. Wow, thank you." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, it is." I go, I would put your podcast against anybody's in Fergus Falls, Minnesota. And if anybody's getting more than 100 listens, okay, well, I guess I'll give them the title, because it's just the way it is. So, but
yeah,
hey,
Jason, that's a great story and a great reminder of that all important question that we've talked about many times. But so what? So what if you don't have the $1 million sponsorship, or a subscriber list in the tens of thousands or whatever? So what? If you're doing what makes sense to do for some end result, whatever that is, and you're accomplishing it, then so what? but it's so easy to get sucked in and steered in different directions and have all kinds of people with advice or opinions or whatever. And if you can't cut out that noise, again, whether you're a podcaster or a quarterback in the NFL or a head coach or an owner or whoever,
or a coach, executive coach.
Yeah, exactly. Then you're not going to have much success. So that being said, I enjoy this conversation with you, Jason, all the time here. And congrats to you on, what'd you say, 15 years of the Crude Life. And always appreciate the opportunity to talk about my own evolution, if you will, over the last several years now of producing just a little bit of media to supplement my largely behind the scenes work as an executive coach.
Well, and I'll end with this too, for some people out there that are kind of wondering where all this is going and everything along those lines, where, let's say that Fergus Falls podcast, or all he got was 100 listens, but in that community, those 100 people are decision makers, and they can really make a lot of things happen in a way that impacts a lot of different people. And when I explained that to him, he did look at his podcast in a whole new way, because that's how I look at the Crude Life in a lot of ways, that I'm not trying to compete with all those other oil and gas podcasts, because they're doing a different deal. And what I know who my audience is. I know how many listen and how many this and that. And so when I explained that to him, he did look at it completely different, and he did stop trying to be Joe Rogan. He did stop trying to be, the hey, I'm gonna be the general catch-all to every podcast and please everybody, and ads. Don't run your business that way. Don't run your podcast that way. I would imagine don't treat your business that way. Find out your niche, find out your skills, find out your talent, and then go after it in that way. So I'll let you kind of have the last word, because that almost sounds like I'm you there for a second. Sounds like I'm giving a pep rally talk.
Ah, yes, the Joe Sinnott doppelganger there. That's what I need here. And I was hoping for a clone by now, but no such luck. So I'll settle for a Jason Spiess mirroring of some of the themes we've talked about today, Jason. But no, in all seriousness, appreciate these conversations, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to tout the benefits of conscious leadership, especially in the energy industry. It's needed now more than ever, when, again, uncertainty is the name of the game. Unpredictability continues to be the name of the game. And if you don't have leaders who can kind of cut through the peaks and valleys and again, ask those basic but important questions about why we make the decisions we make, we're going to be in for some struggles there. So thank you as always, Jason. And I wish you the best as you head into the next 15 years of the Crude Life here.
Joe Sinnott is his name. The name of the company is Whitting Partners. The podcast is the Energy Detox Podcast. It's probably in the 1% of podcasts. Let's call it that, Joe. Right? You're in the 1% of podcasts if you've been around for 7 years now, 7 seasons, because I found out today, after 50% of the people quit. Boy, that was blogs. Remember blogs?
Oh yeah.
It was after the 8th blog. No, after the 5th blog, 80% quit. That's what it was back then. And that industry spoke to me. I was in the print industry, and I always tell people I've survived 8 recessions, but that one took me out. That was the one I lost in, was the 2008 to 2012. But 90% of the newspapers went bankrupt too during that period, so I don't feel so bad. That's called a paradigm shift, ladies and gentlemen, and that's what the oil and gas industry has been going through over the last 15 years, is a paradigm shift. And so one of the reasons why I could speak so astutely and articulately with many of the behind-the-scenes views that were going on. Joe, thank you much for the time today. I'm going to hit stop, so I stop talking, okay?